Welcome back to Ray's Talk Show. This is your host, Ray Collazo. Thank you so much for joining us, Ray's Talk Show. We talk about the issues impacting community, pop culture, Gene Chat, we do from the streets. Thank you so much for joining us. You can check out Ray's Talk Show on Facebook Live if you're my personal friend, of course. But most likely you're going to catch it on the audio version, rayspodcast.com. Check out all of our content there on our website. Or download or subscribe to us anywhere you can listen to a podcast. iTunes. You know, it's that purple app y'all got. Just download me there, please. Just search, go in the purple app with the little purple microphone and look for me and you'll find me. Ray's Talk Show, Ray's Latino Talk. Stitcher, SoundCloud, a lot of us feeling us on Spotify. Thank you, our Spotify audience. And again, you can just always find us on social media. Twitter is where we have a lot of the conversations at Ray's Podcast. That's RAYS Podcast. And on Instagram, because I know our youngins are down with the IG. You can check out at Ray's Latino Talk. That's at Ray's Latino Talk on Instagram. Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight, we're going to, for those listening to the podcast version, we're blessed to have many friends joining us on Facebook Live. So this is a simulcast, if you will. So if you're listening to the show and I start randomly giving shout outs to my homies and homegirls, understand they're interacting with me on Facebook Live. And I really appreciate, particularly those on the East Coast, who will probably just put the kiddies away and now have a little free time for themselves to join us on here for a few moments to talk about the things that are impacting our community. Bendición Titi. Again, our Facebook folks are going to hear, the podcast people are going to hear a lot of shout outs. Again, before we're going to talk about Trump. If you didn't see the news, Trump declared war today. And you're going to find out it wasn't Syria and it wasn't Iraq. It certainly wasn't Saudi Arabia. We're going to continue the ongoing drama, Goya Gate, of the Puerto Rican Day Parade. A lot more corporations now feeling the Boricua flavor. And I want to give props to an Argentinian tonight who's meant a lot to our lives over the last few decades. Not talking about the Pope, not talking about Messi. Another guy from La Tierra de los Gauchos that we have to give some love for, who's done a lot. And looks like he's entering a new chapter of his career. Again, you can catch up. You have to support not everyday Carmen, but at least once a week, probably early in the week, like Tuesday, weekly. But thank you for asking. And again, you have to support the sponsor of today's show, which is Planned Parenthood. You know, they have recently undergone an I Defy campaign, hashtag I Defy, to push back on hate and discrimination in all forms. You know, this is an organization that's literally providing life-saving health care for millions of women, particularly women of color, young women, single moms, and women that oftentimes are slipping through the cracks of our healthcare system. They need our support. We need to defy the hate that's been wrought on that organization. The healthcare fight's not over. We need to make sure that in the final analysis, their funding is saved. The way you want to support the I Defy campaign is to text TALK to 22422. Well, Jenny, if you're down with Planned Parenthood, do me a favor. Un favor, mami. Text TALK, the word TALK, to 22422. Enjoy the I Defy campaign and our friends at Planned Parenthood. Again, I want to remind people, and if you want to keep the conversation going on email, you can email me at podcastraise@gmail.com. That's podcastraise@gmail.com. Let's get to it. Again, you may not have noticed in the news today, but that President Trump released a statement late this morning where he essentially declared war on us, unless you're very upper class and completely healthy. He declared war on the vast majority of Americans. Today, he didn't declare war on Syria. He didn't declare war on Iran. Again, he's certainly, he's grabbing glowing globes with the folks of Saudi Arabia, people who don't let the women in their society drive by themselves. But they're cool, but we're getting attacked. And by the way, Saudi Arabia gave $100 million to his daughter's nonprofit organization. So you see what's going on there, y'all. We're getting this con is happening. This boy is doing it right in our face. So today, the White House announced their proposed fiscal year 2018 budget, which again is not the final budget. It's basically where their dream would be if they could just sign it off, and Congress had nothing to do with it, and the Senate had nothing to do with it, and we had nothing to do with it. If they could just have their wish, what the budget cuts would be. And of course, you would think, okay, what are the big issues impacting our country, right? Well, we need obviously to invest more in education to keep our children up with the the global workforce, the technological boom of our society, job training, right? Because we have all these people in middle America that are disaffected and voting for Trump because they feel like they're going to get some jobs back. Those jobs aren't coming back. Robots took those jobs. Outsourcing took those jobs. So, we would want to invest in supporting those people so they can get job trained, right? So we'd obviously increase investments in these sorts of things. No. The budget today that was announced was cutting $1.7 trillion from federal programs that help people. And we're going to get into what those programs are about in a second. Some people are alluding to them on the chat here. So, to me, is an attack. Straight up attack. And if you ask, we'll get into some of it in a second. If you ask, well, was it like one specific thing? No. Healthcare, education, housing, programs for the most impoverished of our society. Literally, the programs that feed the children, feed the poorest of our society. The disabled were attacked today. War on the disabled. War on people trying to get college, get through college. Higher education resources were attacked today. So I'm going to show you, and I guess the most egregious one, just to get it out the way, is remember during the campaign when Donald Trump said, and he kept telling these people that were listening to him, because most of us cut him off long ago, is that I promise you I'm not going to take any of your health care, no Medicaid, nothing. Well, he just cut his dream budget today, proposed cutting $800 billion out of Medicaid. So the question I ask you is, how could you possibly not have 20 or 24 million or so, which is what the government said, the Congressional Budget Office, and the new ACA budget score is going to come out tomorrow. So it's probably going to be a little worse, more like 25 to 27 million. How could you deny 24, 25, 26 million people, probably out of that, 5 to 7 million Latinos, health care, and say that we'll be better off as a country? If the CBO scores off by 300%, maybe it's 9 million, 11 million, 7 million, still millions of people. Millions of people that some of which will literally either become bankrupt because they won't they have a catastrophic health problem, or will die prematurely. And let's not forget, there's millions of those people are children. So that's the first big one. Let me give you a few other examples here. And again, my friends that know me know I'm not very artistically inclined, but I felt inspired to come up with a few charts here, a few things here. So let me show you something. So the first one I want to mention. Now this is just in 2018. $9 billion off TANF, if you all see that. So that's $9 million, $9 billion he wants to cut for next year for TANF. Okay. Now, of course, we wouldn't, and how they're going to cut it. They're not going to cut it, but they're going to require you to work to get welfare. But if you're working, why do you need welfare? Of course, because you work at a place that pays you $7 an hour and you still can't afford a living wage and you still need food stamps. But of course, the answer couldn't be, why don't we just pay people a fair wage so they don't have to rely on public assistance? But no, the biggest welfare queens in this society is Walmart. Let's not fool ourselves. The aforementioned student loans, a cool $4 billion next year. $4 billion. Yeah, we don't need education in this country. Our students don't need help with that. No wonder our Notre Dame students and our brothers and sisters of Bethune-Cookman stood up and walked out on Betsy DeVos. These are the kind of policies she's co-signing on, by the way. Someone that cares about education, quote unquote. The person that leads our education department in this country, endorsing cutting student loans just in 2018 by $4 billion. Disabled programs, just take $1 million off the top for the disabled. Don't try to think you're going to get funding for all those streets to have disabled ramps. My man's taking $1 billion off the top. I'm speechless on that one. The one in the hood is going to get a lot of attention. Somebody in the chat alluded to it. Food stamps. They call it now SNAP, but in the hood we still call it food stamps, or of course, one of the most loaded words in the Puerto Rican Spanish language, cupones. $3 billion. Okay, $3 billion. So that accounts for, if you play out the budget over several years, they project these things over, a 10-year period. 25% of food stamps nationwide. So let's say, for example, just trying to give it a round ballpark, right? A child needs minimally 90 meals a month, 3 meals a day, 30 days, right? So let's say 80 of those meals are being covered by food stamps for this child. You take 25% of those meals. That's 20 meals a month. This kid's going to be short. Kid's going to be short 20 meals a month. How's that helping this country? But of course, my favorite one, I had to bring this up. So you wonder, okay, where's this money going? You're cutting stuff. You're saving money out of our pockets, out of our mouths, out of our health, out of our student access to college. Where's it going? They're putting a lot of money into defense. Ay bendito, wow, they must be short. This is what they currently have in the defense budget for this year. $585 billion. There's more money in the current defense budget than there is in the rest of the budget combined. But no, they need more money. More money to bomb people in the Middle East, to deport Mexicans, and to incarcerate African-American men. And anyone that smokes pot or takes a hit of any kind. Because Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced last week that he wants his attorneys around the country to push for the maximum sentences for drug crimes, regardless of how big or small. So don't get caught with that dime bag, y'all, because you might be doing some serious time. And again, you're listening to Ray's Talk Show. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, particularly our folks listening on Facebook Live on a Tuesday evening, a crisp Tuesday evening, I think, on the East Coast and around the country. And again, if you want to support the show, support what we're doing, first of all, find me anywhere you can find a podcast and review us. Subscribe to us, share us with your friends. And of course, you can always support the I-Defy campaign of Planned Parenthood by texting TALK to 22422. That's text the word TALK to 22422. So, yes, the defense Alberts to build a wall and build more federal prisons for poor black people and the immigrants that they're going to detain to deport. Well, he ain't paying. We're certainly not paying for that. Well, they're going to pay for something. We're paying for something. That was the answer. The other thing that is not going to get as much attention in the mainstream press, and particularly the Latino community and immigrant rights activists need to pay close attention to, is one of the areas where they're going to save money, upwards of $40 billion over the life of this budget that being proposed, is that, and it's in their talking points, that they're going to save $40 billion by correcting wrong payments doled out in the tax code. And so what that's referring to, that's really not really speaking to what they're talking about, because they're trying to talk around it. So one of the things that they're looking to do in this budget proposal is to deny I-10 filers, so people that are paying federal taxes, that are doing their federal taxes, that are paying the IRS, paying their money, doing their taxes the right way, doing it with a legal identification number that was provided to them by the federal government, an I-10, and denying anyone that does their taxes with an I-10 number instead of a Social Security number, denying them the right to apply, even though they qualify financially, to receive the earned income tax credit and specifically the child tax credit. So if you make a certain amount of money, you sort of fit, you're basically kind of working, struggling, but above the poverty level, but not quite up there. There's many of us around the country a large amount of us actually that qualify for what they call a child tax credit. A lot of us benefit from it. We've all benefited from it in our time. And so for those that apply for an ITIN number, even though they're paying their taxes, even though we estimate 85 to 90% of those children that would receive the benefit, because the benefit's for the child, remember that, so that the child can eat. Not like they're going to have a lot of food stamps around anymore, and can have the basic necessities to take care of that child. They're looking to cut the eligibility of ITIN filers for that earned benefit, tax benefit. And so again, that's a clause, that's a savings that would almost exclusively be on the back of not only Latino kids, an estimated 4 million Latino children, but almost exclusively U.S. citizen children. So what that proposal would do, and Jeff Sessions has referred to it pretty racistly in the news recently, saying, that this is money that our government's giving to Mexicans who don't deserve it, illegal people, and using the word Mexican as an epithet. That is further propagating not only sort of Latino immigrants, whether they're documented or undocumented, sort of this perception of sort of being a second-class citizen in the way they're treated and their civil rights. But even in this case, these are U.S. citizen children, U.S. citizens, that literally would be denied a tax benefit that their family financially qualifies for, as their family is paying taxes, and their parent citizenship status is of no fault of their own. They have nothing to do with what their parents' status is here in this country. So I think it's a pretty fair to say that Trump declared war on our community and, frankly, the majority of Americans today. And we need to continue to resist. We need to continue to push back on this. It would be charitable to say extreme right-wing agenda mixed in with a whole lot of hate and a callousness for humanity. I think it's pretty clear after the first 4 months of this administration that I don't think this guy, outside of people with a handful of people whose last name is Trump and Jared Kushner, I don't think this man gives a damn about anybody, quite honestly. I think he wouldn't have a problem with any of these people going to jail for him. And they're probably going to. Again, I know y'all like my graphics. Text TALK to 22422. Support Planned Parenthood today. Again, thank you for listening to Ray's Talk Show. If you want to, one of the things we can do, if you want to talk to your federal officials, because right now this budget conversation is now in their hands, the House, the Senate. Very important if you live in California, in places like Central Valley, suburban Los Angeles County. What's up, Rick? Good to see you, brother. You want to target those Republican Congress people, Darrell Issa, Devin Nunes. It's amazing that man still has a job. Jeff Denham and the rest of the Republican delegation, because they're going to be very swing votes in these conversations. In South Florida, of course, Mario Diaz-Balart, he sits on a key congressional committee. So our Miami folks with Corbello and Diaz-Balart need to keep the heat on. And there's a myriad of really every member of Congress is very important in this conversation. Our friends in South Jersey, Frank Lobiondo is going to be important. Our suburban Philadelphia members of Congress who actually voted the right way on the health care bill are going to be very important. So there's folks all over the country. And look, we got to keep the Democrats accountable as well. So keep the heat on, because there may be Democrats that may let that child tax credit get negotiated out because that's an immigrant thing, Latinos, whatever. So we got to be diligent even with people that are generally friendlier to our cause, because we, quite honestly, we can't trust any of them. You want to call, if you don't know who your congressperson is, or you don't know, I have it in the show notes. If you don't know who your senator is, you don't know who to call, you're not sure, look at the number and figure out where you live with the congressional maps. I have an easy way of doing it. Call 1-866-426-2631, 1-866-426-2631. And what you want to do, it's really cool, you call this number, and all you have to do is put your area, zip code, And what they'll do is they'll patch you into your local member of Congress. That's all you got to do. So it's really easy. And I'll put it in the show notes, and I'll Facebook and tweet it out when I release the audio version of the show. Again, you just want to call. If you just want to call somebody, member of Congress, let them know how you feel about these issues. 1-866-426-2631. 1-866-426-2631, and type in your zip code, and they'll patch you into your member of Congress. And you probably want to call during business hours because you want to jam their lines, because these people need to know that we're out here. We're not going to take it. We're going to defy. We're going to resist. Hands off hashtag is for the budget campaign. Okay, y'all. Thank you again for listening to Ray's Talk Show. I want to talk now about the ongoing, some call it Goya Gate. The Puerto Rican, for those people who don't follow it, the Puerto Rican Day Parade in New York City, really the national Puerto Rican Day Parade for Puerto Ricans throughout the diaspora, is under fire by many of their corporate sponsors, including iconic sponsors like Goya, AT&T, the Yankees, Los Yankees, of all people. Coca-Cola, JetBlue are pulling part of all of their sponsorship of this year's Puerto Rican Day Parade in response to an attack of the parade organizers by the extreme right wing, because the parade is honoring this year and bestowing the National Freedom Hero Award to Oscar Lopez Rivera. Oscar Lopez Rivera was a Puerto Rican political prisoner that served 34 years in very harsh federal prison conditions because of his support for the pro-independence movement and his alleged involvement in bombings and in other nefarious activities. Oscar, in 2014, the parade supported and for several years a wide spectrum of Puerto Rican leaders across the political ideological spectrum supported his release and clemency, and in the waning days of the Obama administration his sentence was commuted, and he recently was released out of home arrest. He spent the last few months in his daughter's house in Puerto Rico, house arrest. And so some are saying that, this man was a terrorist, quote unquote, including a star who has totally fallen off, Willie Colon, who's gone to the dark side. His mind is in another place. Talk about Willie in a second. And sponsors are quivering in their boots and stepping away from us. So I have a few things to say about this. One is, the timing is odd. In 2014, the parade was very open about their endorsement of this man being released from federal penitentiary, 34 years. Never really convicted of directly hurting somebody. There's conjecture, there's planning, there's, circumstantial evidence he was part of some things, but never directly, convicted of murder or anything like that. And he did 34 hard years, to the point where, again, across the ideological spectrum he was supported, wasn't an issue. Now, all of a sudden, now we're in a different political climate nationally, and a few people trying to, I guess, cozy up to the administration, sort of push this agenda. Corporate America, including people like Goya, goddamn, how much money has Goya made off Puerto Ricans? Back away from us. And so my response is, I think this is a blessing. I'm going to tell y'all why. Because we see what's going on from the island of Puerto Rico, which you talk about a war, an attack. The island is literally, figuratively being financially choked. Raphael makes a good point. It does coincide with the status vote. That's a joke. Yeah, it's like, we're $80 billion in debt. Why don't you marry us, United States? We're going to be still the Corteja, I believe. They ruined our credit. They kicked us out, Raphael. But forget attacking all of that energy that could be going to the hedge funds and Wall Street barons that have suckered our island into these horrible loans and financial arrangements that are choking our island. Forget the federal government that set us up to fail financially because of taking away the tax credits in the 80s from the Jones Act, which is why you pay so much money for goods why do we pay all this money for coffee in Puerto Rico? The Medicaid gap, which we've had to continually fill with our own government's coffers over the years. Forget attacking those people. Forget those policies. You're going to attack a man as a Puerto Rican freedom fighter that received wide support for his release. It was released by President Obama, not a slouchy guy, not a radical guy, okay? And by the way, did it in la última hora. Not only did it even in the middle of his presidency, which he certainly could have done, which, by the way, President Clinton did with most of the rest of the prisoners. He didn't wait till the last 2 days he was in office, FYI. So what I say is I think it's a blessing. I'm going to tell you all why. Because I think this is an opportunity for the Puerto Rican community and, the Latino community, because Puerto Ricans are very, for the most part, pretty overwhelmingly collaborative as it relates to supporting non-Puerto Rican issues like immigration issues and other issues impacting other communities. It's time for all of us to stand up for ourselves. So one of the things I'm proposing, and I'm going to reach out to a few of my friends tomorrow, like Charlie Ramos and a few others, is I think, you know what? If they're not going to sponsor the parade, let's sponsor it our damn selves. I'm sure there's enough Puerto Rican professionals to have a few extra bucks in their pocket that we could, even if we can't match exactly, that sponsorship money, we could represent and pay for those scholarships for those kids ourselves. So I think it's a blessing because at the end of it, we have to. It's the concept of we have to do for ourselves. Obviously, we're not going to get out of this budget hole on the island, by trying to become a state. We got into this mess because of this relationship. Again, you get treated this way as a corteja that you want to get married. Doesn't work that way. Now, I'm not saying I have it all figured out as it relates to the status. It's very complicated. And, at this point, we really probably don't have any good options presented to us. But what I would say is that it's an opportunity for the Puerto Rican community to stand up to ourselves and let's own our power. Oftentimes, whether it's local city politics, whether it's these larger conversations around empowerment through finances and who's going to sponsor us and who's going to save us and who's going to take care of it. We're going to take care of our damn selves. It's interesting because I get around a little bit and I find it ironic that the talents of Puerto Ricans are admired, think about it, throughout the world. Think about our celebrity class, the artists, the intellectuals, not just entertainers, but people from all genres of sectors of society who are admired not just in the United States or Puerto Rico, but admired throughout the world. And so I think it's a call to action for all of us to say, you know what? You don't want to sponsor our parade? We'll sponsor our own damn parade. And I think it was very well said by a good friend of mine, David Collazo, who I admire a lot for his advocacy and his passion and his fearlessness in supporting the Puerto Rican community and Puerto Rican causes. He said, you know what? Maybe it'll finally become, again, the Puerto Rican Day Parade instead of whatever sponsor or whatever corporate interests were overriding us. And you're listening to Ray's Talk Show. Thank you so much for joining us. If you want to support our partner, and very important, we support the work of Planned Parenthood, text TALK to 22422. That's 22422. Join their I Defy campaign. Planned Parenthood pushes back on hate and discrimination in any quarter, whether it relates to discriminating women, people of color, the disabled, people trying to get a higher education, basically everyone Trump's against. We defy that, hashtag I defy. And on the budget piece, the hashtag you want to use is hands off, hashtag hands off if you're going to get engaged in any of it. I was looking at the numbers. I text some good friends of mine today that are involved in a lot of mentoring and training of Gear Up Trio students, thinking about our years at Columbia University, Joe Ayala, Double Discovery, those kind of programs, Head Start. Like a third of the kids in these programs are Latinos, whether it's Gear Up, Trio, Head Start. These programs, which were lifesavers for many of us, these after school programs, these enrichment programs, they literally saved so many of us. Head Start from the beginning. We don't have enough money in Head Start in this country, much less slashing it. Meals on Wheels? Are these people cruel? Got to push back on them, y'all. Hands off. Hashtag hands off my budget. Hands off these critical resources impacting our community. And what's up to your man, Willie Colon? Let me tell you something about Willie. When I was a kid, he's probably one of the most iconic figures of my life. My dad was a big salsa DJ. Willie Colon was I'm a child of the 70s. Willie Colon was the soundtrack of my life, literally, when I was a kid. I mean, and, you know, and late as I became an adult, met him. One of the highlights of my college life was bringing him to Columbia University with my great friends that are watching this, like Albert and Jenny and Vivian and all those folks. And subsequently, a good friend of mine, Councilwoman Maria Quinones, ran his congressional campaign years later. Lots of ties to Willie. A legendary figure in our community. My man's fallen off. And these comparisons to comparing 9/11 terrorists to Oscar Robert Rivera are very misguided. I hope Willie gets help. You know, it's a shame because one of the symptoms of oppression is when you identify with your oppressor because you want as a protection mechanism. And my friends like Rafael Alvarez and others are better explaining this. But essentially, when you hear these delusional people like Willie Colon and others that are supporting the Trump agenda, that are falling into this ridiculous right-wing ideological time warp, it's part of its confusion. There's lots of reasons, but at the base of it is you feeling like you don't want to be targeted for attack or stigmatized, so you want to coddle up to the oppressor or the autocrat or whatever. This ideology saying, well, if I agree with the ideology and I associate myself with it, then I'll be protected. The reality is, let me tell you something, Michael Flynn ain't protected. Vice President Pence ain't protected. So you're not going to be protected. So I hope Willie gets some help. Willie, you've fallen off, brother. Got to get it together. Again, thank you for joining Ray's Talk Show. Tito and some others. Raphael's breaking it down here. And again, we really appreciate our podcast listeners checking us out. Download and subscribe to anywhere you can download a podcast, Ray's Latino Talk Podcast. And the last thing I wanted to talk about tonight, unless people have any other questions they want to throw out there on the Facebook Live chat, really appreciate people hanging in with me, is, you know, Manu Ginobili probably played his last game in the NBA. For people that don't follow basketball, Manu Ginobili is an Argentine that's, even though you could argue Orlando Blackman, even though a Panamanian born in Panama, raised in New York City, and even Al Horford went to high school in the United States, raised in Dominican Republic. I think pretty clearly the greatest Latin American basketball player of all times. Manu has been a legendary figure not only in the NBA with the San Antonio Spurs, winning multiple championships, even as literally an old man in the NBA, a 39-year-old, blocked likely NBA MVP candidate James Harden in a key playoff game that got them past the second round into the Western Conference Finals. Manu's still a good player. And, you know, I just wanted to give him a shout out because he's meant so much for, you know, Latin America and Latinos in basketball. A legendary figure in international basketball, has carried Argentina to multiple medal appearances in the Olympics and other global competitions, and always has done it with a lot of class. So I wanted to give, even though I'm certainly not a San Antonio Spurs fan, and the Argentinian national teams beat up my Boricuas many times, I want to give Manu Ginobili a shout out because he's really a once in a generation talent from South America. We really haven't had. He's been in the NBA many years, and we really haven't, with a few exceptions, good players, role players from Brazil and Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. And again, Horford's a very good, an all-star player, but there's only one Manu. So mucho respeto a El Gaucho de San Antonio. So want to thank everyone listening to Ray's Talk Show. My East Coast people, get some rest. A lot going on. Hopefully we'll have some good weather for Memorial Day weekend. And again, we have to continue to resist. Trump declared war on us. There's no doubt about it. I think about many of our friends that are that work in nonprofit organizations that run some of these programs that literally are going to be slashed tremendously, hypothetically, or will disappear if he gets what he wants. We have to resist. We have to mobilize ourselves. And in relation to the Memorial Day Parade, let's just do it ourselves, y'all. I'm down. I got a few bucks. Let's start that movement. Let's start a GoFundMe, and let's get it done for ourselves and our children. We'll take care of them. We know what's best. Again, if download and subscribe to Ray's Latino Talk Podcast. Check out all of our content at rayspodcast.com. Email us at podcastrays@gmail.com. Continue the conversation on Facebook, Ray's Podcast, Twitter at Ray's Podcast, or on Instagram, IG. I'll do more on IG, I promise, at Ray's Latino Talk. Thank you all so much for joining us, y'all. Appreciate my Facebook Live people. Get some rest. Yo lo bendiga. Resist, resist, resist. Hands off.